The second piece of data that both believer and non-believer must explain is the recorded appearances of Christ. 10 distinct appearances are recorded. These occurred from the morning of his resurrection to his ascension 40 days later. They show great variety as to time, place, and people. 2 were to individuals, Peter and James. Other appearances were to the disciples as a group, and 1 was to 500 assembled believers. They were each one at different places. Some were in the garden near his tomb, and some were in the upper room. 1 was on the road from Jerusalem to Emmaus, and some were far away in Galilee. Each appearance was characterized by different acts and words by Jesus. Lies or legends cannot explain the empty tomb, nor can we dismiss the appearances of Jesus Christ on this kind of basis. The accounts are testimonies given by eyewitnesses, people who were there, had seen and interacted with him, and were profoundly certain of the truth of their statements. Logically, one might propose hallucinations to discount these eyewitness accounts of Christ's appearances after crucifixion. At first, this sounds like a plausible explanation of an otherwise supernatural event. It is plausible, until we remember the common laws observed by modern medicine, which apply to such psychological phenomena. As we relate these principles to the evidence at hand, we can see what at first seemed most plausible is, in fact, impossible. Hallucinations generally occur in people who tend to be vividly imaginative and of a nervous makeup. But the appearances of Christ were to all sorts of people. True, some were sensitive, but they were also hard-headed fishermen like Peter and others of various dispositions. Hallucinations are known to be extremely subjective and individual. For this reason, no two people have the same experience. In the case of the resurrection, Christ appeared not just to individuals, but also to groups, including one with more than 500 people. When Paul wrote his first letter to the Christians in Corinth, he said more than half of those people were still alive and could tell about these events.
"For what I received, I passed on to you, as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers and sisters at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all he appeared to me also, as to one abnormally born."
Hallucinations usually occur only at particular times and places, and they are associated with the events fancied. However, these appearances occurred both indoors and outdoors, and in the morning, afternoon, and evening. In general, psychic experiences occur over a long period of time and with some regularity. These appearances happen during a period of 40 days, and then stopped abruptly. No one ever said they happened again. Perhaps the most conclusive indication of the fallacy of the hallucination theory is a fact often overlooked. In order to have an experience like this, one must so intensely want to believe that he or she projects something that really isn't there, and attaches reality to this imagination. For instance, a mother who has lost a son in the war remembers how he used to come home from work every evening at 5:30. She sits in her rocking chair every afternoon, musing and meditating. Finally, she thinks she sees him come through the door and has a conversation with him. At this point, she has lost contact with reality. One might think hallucination is what happened to the disciples regarding the resurrection. The fact is, the opposite took place. They were persuaded against their wills that Jesus had risen from the dead. Mary came to the tomb on the first Easter Sunday morning with spices in her hands. Why? To anoint the dead body of the Lord she loved. She was obviously not expecting to find him risen from the dead. In fact, when she first saw him, she mistook him for the gardener. It was only after he spoke to her and spoke her name that she realized who he was. When the other disciples heard, they didn't believe. The story seemed to them as an idle tale. When the resurrected Jesus finally appeared to the disciples, they were frightened and thought they were seeing a ghost. They thought they were having a hallucination, and it jolted them. To convince them, Jesus finally said,
"Peace be with you." They were startled and frightened, thinking they saw a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you troubled? And why do doubts rise in your minds? Look at my hands and my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see I have." When he had said this, he showed them his hands and feet. And while they still did not believe it because of joy and amazement, he asked them, "Do you have anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate it in their presence.
He asked them if they had any food, and they gave him a piece of broiled fish. Luke didn't add the obvious. Ghosts don't eat fish. Finally, there is the classic case which remains in our language today, doubting Thomas. Thomas, one of the apostles, was not present when Jesus appeared to the disciples the first time. They told Thomas about it, but he scoffed and would not believe them.
"Unless I see the scars of the nails in his hands, and put my finger on those scars, and my hand in his side, I will not believe."
He wasn't about to succumb to a hallucination. Yet John gives us the graphic story of Jesus' appearance to the disciples a week later. John chapter 20. The Lord graciously invited Thomas to examine the evidence of his hands and his side. Thomas looked at him and fell down in worship. "My Lord and my God." To hold the hallucination theory in explaining the appearances of Christ, one must completely ignore the evidence. What was it that changed a band of frightened, cowardly disciples into men of courage and conviction? What was it that changed Peter, who was so afraid for his own skin the night before the crucifixion that he publicly denied 3 times that he even knew Jesus? Some 50 days later, he became a roaring lion, risking his life by saying he had seen Jesus risen from the dead. It must be remembered that Peter preached his electric Pentecost sermon in Jerusalem, where all these events took place, thus putting himself in grave danger. He was not in Galilee, miles away where no one could verify the facts and where his ringing statements might go unchallenged. Only the bodily resurrection of Christ could have produced this astounding change in Peter.